At this time, I'd like to call the special board meeting, the Adjournment Area School District to order. I would like to read one statement. Members of the public and media who would like to attend the meeting shall be expected to adhere to social distancing protocols and wear face masks covering per the governor's order. So please adhere to that. Thank you. With that, has the meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it is.
Could you please all rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Joanne? Motion made by Jim, second by Joanne to adopt the agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Joanne.
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Lucas?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, it passes 9-0. Going on, Board of Education reports. I'll start, when we get down to 3.61 and 3.62, there'll be first readings. I'll just read those into the record, and we'll put a policy committee meeting for a half hour before the next board meeting to get those in the second reading. Okay, Mel? Anything else from the Board of Education? Also, I'd like to state, you won't see the Building and Grounds Director until September. We haven't been able to get that RFQ out yet because of the work they've done for the reopening plan. So you won't see that on next week's agenda, but you'll see that in September. With that, is there anything else? Going on, board retreat information, the attorney we're going to have come in to talk about ethics and responsibilities of boards and stuff. We're trying to set a date. It looks like it might be the last Wednesday of October. Is that correct, Susie? So that's where if you guys could possibly clear your calendars. She could not make it on a Monday. So and that Monday is also the levy meeting. So we would make it, we try to do it on that Monday, but it'll have to probably be that Wednesday. All right, so if you look at your calendars,
Still evening?
it'll still be evening, probably 6 to 9. Okay? Any other information for that station? Okay. If you have a certain topic that you might want to cover, please submit it to me or Stace or Tom, and we'll see if we can fit it in along with our discussion. With that, moving on, District Administrative Report. Tom, AF reopening plan 8-3 on 8-3.
Yep, 8/3/2020 tonight. So first I just want to recognize that this is a plan that is in constant flux. I talked to our conference superintendents this afternoon for an hour. 4 of the 6 had meetings tonight, 2 had meetings next week. We have both. And all of them would tell you the same thing. These reopening plans are very, very fluid at this point in time. So with that, kind of moving through this, from the beginning, we've been talking about pursuing a full return to school. I believe most of our conference neighbors are in the same position that we are. We like our students in school, but taking into account the health and safety of our students, staff, and community. Part of our conversation has been around the educational rigor and consistent delivery of content that we believe is best provided in person. We've had a number of conversations regarding the social and emotional well-being of all of our students, including the community. The school district is the conduit to mental health services for not only our students, but oftentimes families. And when our students aren't here, we believe, as does the county, that there is a gap in identifying and providing those services where needed. And then trying to continue to communicate this plan with our entire community. We also looked at a number of guidelines, particularly the guidelines from the CDC. Those are linked to there if you haven't had a chance to look at that. Our plan, as of 7:07 p.m. on August 3rd, is to have a full reopening with the necessary safety precautions in place to protect our students and staff and community. We are very cognizant of the fluidity of this pandemic and are making contingency plans for as many scenarios as possible. But we're really focusing on 3 models in particular, and then a 4th kind of outside of the school district. So model number 1 would be a full reopening with traditional classroom learning. When we say that, school's going to look very different if we start with a full opening than it normally would. So traditional learning basically means students will be in our schools, but how we pod and group students is going to look very different. Model number 2 is an AB blended model where we would have students divided in half across our district. The A group would attend schools on Monday and Tuesday, and the B group would attend schools on Thursday and Friday. In the interim, students would be learning, the term they're using is in an asynchronous way, but basically they'd be working at home either through packets or electronically where possible. The third would be what we've just experienced over the last 4 months or so towards the end of the school year, from March 13th on, which would be non-traditional instruction, so students would be working at home in packets or electronically, virtually if possible. And then the 4th model is we've solidified our contract and relationship with Adjournment, and we'll be offering families not only in the Adams Friendship Area School Districts, but families outside of the district the opportunity to open enroll in a virtual K through 12 program for our students, literally for the entire school year. So that'll be out there. It is recommended that students with underlying health conditions or known weakened immune systems are encouraged to contact their primary care provider for guidance before attending school in person, and that would be the same for our staff as well. And please stop if you have questions along the way. Traditional classroom learning would be face-to-face instructions where students attend school 5 days per week in at least the traditional setting. Preventive measures are being put in place to include the following, and this is the model we're recommending tonight. Today, if we were to start school, we're trying to put up PPE and physical distancing. Students and staff and community members will continue to be educated and trained on the best practices, including facial coverings. It would be nice if facial coverings didn't steam up, so I could actually wear the facial covering and read the document. Distancing, cleaning and sanitation, and providing PPE where necessary throughout our buildings. There would be variation between the levels on what this looked like. School would be 5 days a week for all of our students, but we would extend, or we would shorten the time of day that students are in school. Part of the reason for doing this is providing additional prep and planning time for our teachers, but also we don't want students to transition in buses. So our goal would be students would get on one bus in the morning and then get dropped off at their school. And then they'd get on one bus in the afternoon and get dropped off at home. So we wouldn't have the convergence that historically has happened at least the last few years at the high school at the end of the day, where we're bringing buses in and we're having students from across the district move from bus to bus. What we're talking about, and we've been in communication with our school nurse and the county health official. The school nurse and the county health official are not comfortable with a 5-period transition day. I will tell you that some of our neighbors are still planning on an 8-period day with the transitions like that. Our folks aren't necessarily comfortable with that, so they thought if we could shrink the day down to 3 sessions. So what that would look like at the high school, and this is what I'm talking specifically thing about the high school is that we have a first section, a longer second section in the middle of the day, and a third section at the end of the day. So on day one, students would experience period 1, 2, and 3. On the second day of school, students would experience periods 4, 5, and then back to 1. So in that second period, we can stagger lunches a little bit better. We have an advisory period in lieu of a traditional homeroom experience for our students. Do you have a question?
You can keep going, but after. You can keep going.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You can keep going. I can ask after you're done.
He'll ask after you're done.
Oh, sure. And part of the reason for that three-period thinking is that we minimize or at least reduce the number of transitions during the day. So students would be with 3 groups a day versus the traditional 5 groups a day. So that was the reason for that. The middle school, and we're working with our transportation provider at start. We'd shrink the day a little bit. And students would be in cohorts. So students would be in one class all day with one teacher. And I believe at the middle school, students would experience math with their math teacher, but it would be electronic. Science with their science teacher, but it would be broadcast into their classroom, kind of a homeroom pod. And so we really minimize the transitions during the day for our middle school students, and those students would stay in cohorts most of the day. And our elementary school is a little bit easier to do this because they're already, in a sense, in classroom pods. We try to use staff differently, so we would decrease the number of students in pods. So at the middle school and elementary level, we have 15 students max in each of the classrooms. So we have about a 15-to-1 ratio. Again, that's not a 10-to-1 ratio. It's not a recommendation, but it's what we can do. And it's also very similar to what our neighbors are doing as well to get kids in school. 4K and our early childhood special education students would only be in school 4 days a week. We wanted to start 5-day-a-week programming for those students and have more of a daycare-like experience, but unfortunately this is not the year to do that. We're moving to all-day 4K, 4 days a week, and we'll be exploring what that looks like for our 4K and EC kids in the future. The other thing that it's not on here, and we've talked about it administratively, and we don't have an answer for you yet today, is how we provide after-school care, if we provide after-school care. So that's a question that districts across the state are grappling with. The next model, AD blended learning, we've talked a little bit about this. Students would be divided into 2 groups. We've already got the students divided. Family members would all move together. So you'd start with 4K students and move up. And so if they've got older siblings, step-siblings, half-siblings, all the older siblings fall with the younger student. And then when we get all those students grouped up, we're working on dividing the rest of the students to try to minimize the number of kids that are in classes and in buildings. And then non-traditional instruction is what we've experienced. And again, that's a struggle for our community. To say virtual, I think, is a misnomer. We know that approximately 20% of our students, we're guesstimating at this point in time, about 20% of our students don't have access to high-speed internet that's usable or workable. And that presents a lot of problems and equity issues for the students that can't access virtual learning in that way and would have to do most of their work out of packets. And then we talked at great length about the next model, the fourth kind of offshoot, which is the Adams Spencer Virtual School. We have contracted with Adjournment to provide those services. They're in the business of providing virtual instruction. We've vetted a number of programs and believe that Adjournment would be the best organization to serve our students. And for people that don't know, we already have over 30 students that are open enrolled from our district to virtual programs in other districts, so we're targeting those people to try to bring them back. And then we're also trying to target people that may be interested in exploring a virtual option. We don't believe that the virtual option can replace a brick and mortar option, but it's something that if families, if they have a student or a family member that precludes them from coming to school, it would be a real viable option for those individuals and families. The preventive measures that we're putting in place, cohorting students so that we minimize contact with other students throughout the day. Food service, we're looking at the option of a limited number of students eating in the cafeteria, possibly on a daily basis, but probably the majority of our students eating in their classrooms. So we've ordered equipment in order to help facilitate that. It's also going to require some additional cleanup, obviously, on a daily basis. And then cleaning, we're talking about potentially adding custodians across the district, as well as trying to purchase the filters and cleaning solutions that are recommended to battle COVID. Face coverings, this is less of an issue than when we originally started writing this. Based on the governor's last order, we're going to recommend requiring face coverings for all students. We are going to purchase cloth face coverings and probably get into the washing business on a nightly basis. We're purchasing laundry bags. We try to keep face coverings clean. We'll send some home. We also know that we're going to constantly be in the face covering replacement business as well. So we just know that. Instruction, we're going to obviously continue an emphasis on our core academic work. One of the things that we're learning about students that experience education at home since March, that there's been less social emotional learning and social emotional counseling that's going on for most of those students and families. So that's going to be a focus as well. And we're really working hard to try to ensure that students are able to complete elective and co-curricular activities. We know how important those are in students' lives and are working on ways, learning from ourselves and others about ways to allow students to participate in those activities safely and productively. We're really working on minimizing, for student flow in the building, minimizing transitions. That is a huge concern of the healthcare professionals that we're working with. To minimize the number of transitions, the number of contacts students have during the day, you're less likely to be transmitting the disease across different groups and populations. So social distancing and minimizing those transitions. We'll keep grade level groups together. It's much easier at the elementary and middle school level than the high school level, but at the high school level, if we move towards a three-period day, we can at least minimize some of the transitions that are occurring. Transportation, we've been in communication regularly with our transportation provider, with Cobison. We're working on arrival and departure strategies to minimize kids' contact and congregating and milling around in our hallways. We're also working with food service so that students would come into the building and potentially receive a sack breakfast and go directly to their classrooms. And we're going to also ask the public and our bus company to not have students in the building earlier than we can handle them. So we're going to ask that people try to, if they're self-transporting their students, not have their students get there more than 10 to 15 minutes before the bell to minimize students congregating and following outside of school. We're working with our transportation provider on what our buses are going to look like. Our registration material will be ready to go out very soon, and we'll be asking families specifically if they plan on self-transporting or allowing high school students to drive. So we'll have a better idea from the bus company within a couple of weeks to start planning their routes. We anticipate that there will be a number of families that elect to self-transport that historically have been riders on their buses. So So we believe there are going to be less people on the bus, and this will take some time for everyone to get used to, and we're aware of that. I'd like to commend Cobus, and they've been excellent partners in this process. They've been very easy and good to work with as we're talking about changing plans on a very regular basis. Walkers and self or family transported students, we'd like to note to arrive at school no earlier than 10 minutes prior to the start of school, and we're going to be staggering release time. And again, we're going to probably have all of our bus routes, 19 or 20 buses, driving through every building. And we're working, I know there was some correspondence today with the elementary building staff in particular. We're working with our transportation providers to kind of set groups of buses, starting at the elementary level, moving to the middle school level, and then to the high school level, so we don't have any kind of bus transfer on a daily basis. And we're going to have some designated spots for our families that are electing to self-transport, so we're dropping students off. We're not going to be able to allow parents into the building, so we're going to have a slightly different drop-off process at the elementary level too. We understand that a lot of families like those long, drawn-out goodbyes at the beginning of the day at the elementary level, and we're going to obviously try to minimize that. We're going to try to keep students moving into the buildings in a very staggered and individual kind of way. And then community connections. We hope that people still stay engaged. We want our community to be aware of what we're doing, and we hope to hear from people. For preventive measures, we're working with our school nurse to send a checklist home. We're going to be asking that families do a kind of health check every morning before they send their kids to school. And we're going to really implore families to keep students that aren't feeling well or exhibiting any kind of COVID-related symptoms to stay home as well. And we'll be monitoring and reporting what's happening at school with our county health department as we move forward. And then we have a series of frequently asked questions on the back page. How will we monitor distancing and protective measures? Staff and students will be provided education and best practices regarding how to keep themselves safe in the school building, follow signs and barriers throughout the day. If students are exhibiting symptoms, we have rooms in each of our buildings now that are basically quarantine areas, and we've purchased protective equipment that's being implemented across the district daily right now. If you come into our office, you'll notice that in front of Allie's desk, there's a very large plexiglass barrier. And if there's a confirmed case, we'll continue to work with the health department and try to do contact tracing and try to make sure that students and staff members that may have been exposed to that individual child are quarantined for a little while to try to keep everyone else safe. Our issues continue to be, from a virtual instruction perspective, related to access to internet broadband. I believe I sent something to the school staff and the school board that was on the CBS News. Michelle cued me in on that on Sunday. And obviously it's not just our community, but it's across rural America. And it really creates some equity issues for families that are trying to access virtual instruction. If there are families that don't feel safe to return to school or have a medical reason for not returning their students to school, we hope they explore our virtual option. And if the number of cases in our area rises, we'll be working with the county health department, and we anticipate that this plan be in flux and maybe moving between models throughout the school year. And planning for individual families, and this cannot be stressed enough in italics. Families will need to plan for every scenario. Traditional classroom instruction, AV blended learning, and non-traditional instruction. And again, what I just mentioned, but I'm going to repeat myself at the risk of being redundant, we anticipate the potential of having to move between models as the number of cases in our area changes over time. So again, I've been in communication with all of the districts that make up our athletic conference. I've been in communication with the districts in the CISA 5 region, as well as some of my contacts still in the CISA 3 area. And this is our best representative example at this particular time. Over the next week, I'm going to be working with seating a group of community members, teachers, custodians, healthcare providers, to kind of continually review these plans until the start of school.
Thank you, Tom. Questions? Lucas?
So
Tom, check.
Okay.
So I have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ask one for now. With the cohorts, is it possible to construct them in a way in which we're considering transportation methods? So if we have 20 students on a bus, they would be more likely to be in the same cohort. Or if students are riding with their parents, they'd be more likely to be in the cohort as other students that are also riding with their parents.
That's like the secondary concern. The first concern, and we've already talked to the bus company about this, our first concern is keeping families together. Once we have that established and we get information from families through registration, regarding who's planning on riding the bus or self-transported, then work with the bus company to try to balance it out. So there are students that might move back and forth. If we have, if on an A group we have 30 kids on the bus, then on the B group we only have 10, it makes sense to try to balance it out. But at the same time, we'll be balancing, our first concern is balancing the costs and then working out.
You can ask more if you want. Well,
Just one thing I noticed, so the high school is, I think, the last one to start. I'm just thinking about high school siblings dropping off their younger siblings. They may have to drop them off. High school's the last started at 8:35.
High school we started early.
Oh, yeah. So if a high school student had to drop their sibling off, they might be dropping them off at 8:10 or wanting to. Okay. I didn't know if that'd be a problem.
The issue that we, again, are trying to balance is, in normal years, students in 7th and 12th grade need more instructional time than
Oh, okay.
students under 7th grade, 6th and under. So we're still, although we wouldn't be able to meet the instructional minutes required by the state, we're trying to acknowledge
Okay.
that high school students should be in school more than elementary school
Okay.
students. But we understand that
That might
we
happen.
talked about that, yes.
And then would we eliminate backpacks this year?
Backpacks and lockers are still in debate.
Oh.
We're talking with the healthcare providers and what that would look like. For years, it was kids are wearing backpacks that are too heavy. Law enforcement doesn't like backpacks. And now all of a sudden the universe has switched and they're trying to minimize screen time in lockers and congregating around locker spaces. So that's still a question that we have as well.
Jackie.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Are you still going to provide thermometers to all the parents? Okay, thermometers are going to go home, and with instruction, they'll be pretty easy thermometers.
I don't know what type of thermometers we were able to get. I honestly don't know. For families, correct. Oh, we are not. Okay, we are. Okay.
Okay, because that was you mentioned that at the last meeting, thermometers would be provided for all families. Are you still going with different hand washing stations? Are you going to increase them at the elementary in all schools or just elementary?
I know at the middle school we're talking because there's some less restroom space at the middle school, particularly on the secondary floor that's recommended right now. So we're talking about actually bringing in hand washing stations there. We're putting, I know, a hand sanitizing station at least in every classroom. Is that correct? Hand sanitizing station in each classroom, yes.
Okay. I was wondering, are different schools going to be treated differently if there's an outbreak, let's say, in the high school, but not in the middle or elementary? Will you have that flexibility that the schools can individually operate rather than all of it go into AV?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll start with the individual classroom. Our school nurse will be presenting hopefully next week on plans that she's establishing and protocol that she's establishing around specific health-related questions.
Are there state numbers or percentages that will be given to us as guidelines for having to move to a different model?
Yeah, we talked about that. Right now, Adams County is still considered, as of yesterday, a high-risk county. We still have a relatively low number of cases. So we don't necessarily want to tie our school district.
Can't hear you.
Seriously?
Yes, the face
I can
forward.
start over.
Whenever you move your face away from the
I
mic.
apologize. I'm sorry. I'll put it up closer. Wait. Is that better?
I don't think it's on.
It's on. The green light's on.
We'll give you a different one.
Well, I think we'll continue just.
Yep.
I'll try to speak very loud. I think I've filled this room without a microphone before. So, we don't necessarily want to tie school to the county level at this point in time. We're in constant communication with the county health official.
Check.
Our school nurse is in constant communication with the county health official. They walk through our buildings. They approve these recommendations, or at least have agreed to these recommendations. Late last week as we were finalizing this. And we're talking about starting again at the classroom level. If there's a positive case or a student that's exhibiting very positive like symptoms in the classroom, what happens at the classroom level, and then moving out from there.
You said it was easier for us to enforce the mask because of the governor's order mandate. If that is rescinded, are we still going to urge masks at every level?
I think the county health official and our school nurse are looking at recommendations.
If there is non-compliance, and that's a touchy subject for everyone, and I understand that, and I'm trying to say it as politically correct as I can, but if parents indicate that they don't want their child to wear a mask,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
if a parent decides to send a child and says, my child is not going to wear a mask, how do we deal with that?
Well, it's very much like if a child at this point in time masks, unless there's a medical reason or a condition of entrance into the building, we can make that determination like you would a t-shirt that would have alcohol, tobacco, or drug paraphernalia. From what I understand, that's what our attorney is telling us.
So you would enforce it and say that that child would be excused from that?
No, we'd ask them to wear a mask or go home.
And if they don't comply?
We would ask them to wear a mask or go home.
Oh,
I
or
don't know how
home,
else to-
okay, couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Or go home, got it. I understand, okay.
Other questions?
So I really like to see a process built for checking temperatures as students and staff are coming in.
It's something that we're having conversation with our legal counsel about. There's some legal questions about healthcare-related actions in the school district taking those over.
Another thing that came to my mind when we were kind of talking about the plan was with the bathroom situation. Is there concerns that it's going to be hard to social distance with bathrooms? And is there any other kind of special procedures that we're implementing there?
We're going to try to stagger bathroom opportunities greater than we historically have. Obviously, if a student needs to use the restroom, we encourage them to do that. We'll be more attuned for students that may be gone for an extended period of time. And it's interesting having conversation, particularly at the high school. Already with a 5-period day, we have relatively lengthy instructional periods. So to move to a 3-period day, it's a long time to be with a single class of students and a single teacher. So we're really going to have to be conscious of what that looks like for kids and adults as well.
And then I think the last subject that I wanted to ask about was employees and kind of opting to work from home or not at all. Is that something where they would need the doctor's note? Are they given the option?
And that's a topic that almost every district that's recommending some return to school with students is grappling with right now. So we're looking at what others are doing. We're in contact with our attorney as well on that issue. There are some differences than traditional FMLA, and there are some things that would fall under traditional FMLA as well. So we're trying to be very judicious about what that looks like.
We're going to have early release days on Wednesdays. What do Wednesdays now look like?
Wednesdays are going to look, just because we're going to have a semi-early release every day. Wednesday is going to release at the same time. We had a lot of conversation about just some consistency for families that's been missing. So we'll do our PLC experience on Wednesday afternoons, but it'll probably be from 2:45 to 3:45, not we were hoping about 2:15 to 3:30 range, but that just won't be possible at this point.
Jeff, do you have a question? No. Jeff?
I know Kathy suggested at the last meeting, just, updating like an FAQ with some of the questions that were brought up by the board or whatever comes up. That'd be kind of nice, just to keep that rolling. My second one is, as far as, my concern is if we try to take everybody's temperature, how many kids do we have? We're going to violate our own social distancing trying to take everybody's temperature. So really the onus has to come on the parents. I mean, I just don't see the feasibility of scanning that many kids in a morning and then getting them into the classroom in an efficient manner. It's pretty tough.
You're creating another congregation.
Yeah,
absolutely. So there's also some liability questions regarding school districts about getting into the kind of proactive healthcare world versus the reactive healthcare world, and what our responsibilities are in that regard.
I have a question. I know we have a small pool of substitute teachers. Has that pool even shrunk more?
We don't know yet, but I would anticipate that pool shrinking slightly. We have a number of bus drivers that are more senior, and we're concerned about that as well.
With a sub traveling between all kinds of buildings, wouldn't it be wise perhaps if a sub would maybe pick a building and sub for that building rather than traveling between 3 buildings? If that sub or a part of her family or his family became ill, there are 3 contact areas. So, and I know the people who sub for me, a lot of them have preferences anyway. I want to just sub in this school or for that program, or whatever. But I just see that, and we need our subs desperately, but I see traveling from building to building could be really problematic.
We're looking to use a limited term contract and hire an additional staff person in each of our buildings to start the school year as well. But subs are a huge issue in our district, and to potentially limit substitutes to a single building, I understand that. I understand the health implications that you're referring to, but at the same time, we're struggling to fill substitute positions in a normal situation. I think it would be very challenging to do that this year as well.
Is there any other questions?
I have seven more. The FAQ, it says, what would happen if there's a current case? So the response says, we maintain contact with Dennis County Health Department. So are we depending on them telling us when that student is definitely come back? Or is there still not like a clarification we become a parent, I want to know it's not getting over 2 weeks? Or who says when they will go back?
I think 10 days is the current one, and it would be our school nurse in consultation with the county health department. And we're adding we're adding a second school nurse as well, someone that we've contracted with for a long time. So we have a little bit more support in that area as well.
Okay, I see no more questions. Thank you for your report. I think the school will be ready to go. As we know, that may change August 31st for all we know, so.
One more question. Are you going to do like they have done in the high school before, where you had one day just for freshmen and then the others come?
We're hoping to do that, yes.
Okay. But everyone would start on that day that the freshmen start, the middle school and elementary.
I think what we would try to do for that first day of school, we have 5th graders in the building with some 8th grade leaders, and like we did with the freshmen last year, I believe there were juniors and seniors. Maybe there were 7th and 8th graders. Was it just 8th or 7th and 8th? Just 8th grade leaders. So students that were handpicked to help 5th graders. Last year I think it was 5th and 6th, and we were bringing both of those groups in, but this year particularly with 5th graders to get out on the right foot, and then 8th graders to get.
Would it be possible for school board prior to school start to take a walkthrough? Would it be escorted, obviously, before students even attended, to see the layout?
Absolutely, Phil. Yeah, we'll try to arrange an opportunity to do that with the county health people. And again, we need to get a team of people. I know we're talking about getting a team at each building level, and then a district team to constantly review these plans.
Thank you, because that is very helpful, especially with community talk. And you can actually say, eyes on, we saw what's happening. Thank you.
And again, it's a solidified tentative plan, and I understand the irony of that. So, and if you didn't hear me, I could go over again. No.
Moving on to new business, AFD student handbook.
I think Roxy's going to walk us through the changes this year. Obviously, we've added some COVID-related language to our handbooks.
Can you hear me? Okay. So when you look at our handbook, the items in yellow are the changes. And most of those changes are there due to our current COVID situation. So if we start at the beginning, absentee checks and attendance, those requests came from our nurse. You talked earlier about having parents document, so we added and symptoms, so we exactly know what's going on or how they're feeling. And then if their child is absent due to those COVID-related 19 issues, we excusing them from that piece. We added that, again, that was from our nurse. Down to bus rider rules, we added has to wear a mask. We scroll down, mandatory reporting was also a request from Nurse Laura. We all know that we are current mandatory reporters for potential abuse and neglect, but we also found out we are mandated reporters if we hear that there's a family or a student that may have COVID symptoms. So we added that piece in there for our nurse. The non-traditional instruction, Tom talked about earlier. This is a whole new section we added based on what happened in the school year and the school year coming up, and what that would look like if we have to go to completely non-traditional. Parent-teacher conferences, we were hoping to have them, but last year they were only in the fall and we added the spring. So that piece is new. Progress reports, we changed that. In the past, it was three progress reports and 3 report cards. We are just going to do 6 progress reports, letting parents know how their child is doing on end of year goals. So we just changed report cards to progress reports. The student illness piece, again, came from Nurse Lara. There's just not much wording change, but she wanted us to continue to add the student illness. The tobacco and other drugs, we just added the words, which means once you pull in the drive. The high school has a sign when they pull into the drive. We added that. Some of it was because during our COVID homework pickup drop-off, parents were actually smoking in the car as they were picking up material. So we just added that little piece so they know when you pull into the driveway, you're on school property. Visitors and volunteers, we added family and community. That's because that's what our district website said. So we just copied that wording. Ours that said something else. The visitor control procedures, Tom talked about earlier. This is just indicating that we are not allowing parents in the building this year due to the COVID, and that there'll be drop-off sites, and if they come to pick their child up early, they'll call the front office from their car, and we will escort the child outside. So we changed that piece a little bit. Those were the changes we made. Any questions?
Going back to the spring and fall conference, will you do that virtually now with those parents, or see they can't come to the building?
We probably will have to arrange something, and maybe come that time, we'll be in a low risk and things will be able to be different, and we can make a one-on-one appointment without many people in. I don't know.
Other questions? Hearing no questions, we're looking for a motion to approve the handbook as written. Joanne, Kent, I got you in a second? No, Kent, second. Motion made by Joanne, second by Kent to approve the AFT handbook. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Kent.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Glenna.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Melissa.
Yes.
Lucas.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Passes 9-0. Moving on, middle school student handbook. Michelle?
Good evening. So the middle school in its entirety for the handbook is about 32 pages. So the document you received includes the revisions that have been made, okay, on the handbook. Something to note here is that students will be reviewing the handbook when they come to school, and then they will sign a document indicating that they've reviewed it so that they're aware of all of the contents. Just like Roxy said, a lot of the things...
Michelle, we have a hard time hearing you. I don't know if the microphone's got to be closer.
Should I pull it closer?
They need to
Better?
turn the speakers on the stage.
I'm sorry?
They need to turn the speakers on the stage. That's a problem we have in scholarship. It's projecting the sound.
Oh,
Hear the answer to that.
you can hear me, but they can't hear me.
Tom, can you turn the speakers on the stage, maybe? Perfect. Thank you. We're good.
We're getting to the book. Next time it'll be
I can hear a little
perfect.
bit closer. The
Yeah.
second time I thought we could hear you a little better. I think we
Okay.
can.
All right. So what I started out to saying was that the handbook itself is about 30 pages. And it's in our agendas, our student agendas that they receive at the start of the school year. We review this agenda with the students, as well as parents sign off when they do the registration online. So students will be aware of the content and the changes in this document as well. Much like Roxy said, a lot of the changes that you see here today are related to COVID. The other changes are strictly handbook language. Our student service, our school improvement team spent a significant amount of time just reviewing our practices and our procedures and things, and just wanted to update some language. So the first one is just on tardiness, and there's just a little bit of a language revision there. We just liked how we had rewritten that. Things to note that is truly different would be our dress code. The dress code, you can see the original dress code there as compared to that of the revision. The revision takes into account some inequitable practices maybe that we had, and specifically some of the contents that we previously had were a little bit gender biased. So the reason that we made some modifications were to remove some of those natural gender biases that were in place. Additionally, a major change for our students will be our cell phone and electronic devices policy. You can see previously students were able to have their devices if they were in 7th and 8th grade, and we are not going to allow that practice any longer because we really feel that it is a distractor from what we're really here at school to do in our business. So you can see that we will provide an opportunity for students to keep their cell phones either within their lockers, or we have purchased locked cabinets that they can place in their teacher's homeroom. Okay. Additionally, we didn't have anything related to what our social worker does. So we do now, we indicate the purpose and the role of our social worker and how she works with our students. And then the contents of the Chromebook handbook, we updated, Roxy is going to present that to you. It's systemic throughout the district. We have a district-wide handbook, or Chromebook handbook 1-to-1 policy now in practice. So that's included in here just so you can see that that's been updated, as has our NTI, or non-traditional instructional programming practices. And I think that concludes it. Obviously, I'm not going to read it to you, but that's just an overview of what we've done. Do you have any questions?
Is there any questions?
Are you also going to have parent-teacher conferences? Is that mentioned here?
We have parent-teacher conferences, but nothing's changed in the handbook in relation to our conferences. One thing that I might add here that I did change, which I didn't notice, was it indicates the start times and drop-off times. In the actual handbook, we made a little notation that obviously due to the pandemic, the times and practices might have to change. So that's just listed in the handbook. That was brought to my attention on Saturday morning. Somebody made notice of that, so I thought, oh, we should update that. So, but we will have parent-teacher conferences, and if we have to have them virtually, we'll do so.
Any other questions? Motion to approve middle school handbook.
Move to approve.
Jeff?
I'll second it.
Jim? Motion made by Jeff, second by Jim to approve the middle school handbook. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Jim.
Yes.
Lana?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Lucas? Jeff?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, it passes 9-0. High school handbook. Got it.
All right, so I did a summary sheet for the handbook changes. If you look at that document,
We updated some attendance numbers on pages 6 and 7, just to make it follow the practice. Nick was new this year, Mr. Stone was new, and we had some practice changes, so just the numbers have changed a little bit. Then we added a section on fighting and physical assault. We didn't have that in there specifically and just wanted to make sure it was clear. So we added that whole section as a highlight. We added a open campus statement and said we can close campus at any time based on the safety of students. And then we also addressed our dress code, trying to make it more equitable and less gender biased. So we added 2 statements: clothing should not portray hate speech, profanity, violence, or pornography. And then we added no images or language that creates a hostile or intimidating environment based on any protected class. And then took out one that was more gender biased with shirt straps must cover bra straps. So undergarments are already addressed. Then one minor change at the end was just transportation and food. We wanted to make sure students knew that eating on the bus was not allowed. That was a change last year. And then we updated the WA bulletin as well at the end.
Questions? Go ahead, Kathy.
Kevin, are you going to have closed campus for lunch?
We're going to start the year closed campus.
Okay.
That's the direction of the school nurse and public health.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to mention, Kevin had mentioned that you changed some language around the transportation and food, and if you look at that section specifically talking about our after-school supper program, we aren't sure at this point in time, again, about after-school care, after-school supper, co-curricular experiences, any of those things are still in flux. So this is currently where we're at.
If we're going to register people virtually and sign the handbook virtually, we just talked about over 20% of our students can't do that. How are we going to reach those students?
So our students will still sign it in person during
In their advisory room, like it says?
Excuse me?
In the advisory room, like it says?
Yeah, except their advisory might not be the normal advisory. It'd be first period or early period might be the time that we do that. So it would be with the teacher for sure. If we don't, we would have to come up with a plan if we have to start the year virtual.
And we have a plan for signing the information electronically for parents as well.
Parents have the opportunity to sign off on online registration that they have received copies of that and the handbook, along with the other handbooks that we have in our online registration process, if we come up with something that does not have on the internet, they can make an appointment with Allie, who is walk them through the online registration process through a computer at the end.
Everybody hear that? No.
Families that don't have access to the internet are going to be able to make an appointment in the administration building to complete the registration materials if they need to do so. And that's in the materials. Almost all of our families have access to email. And they'll get information for email. Our problem is families don't have access to workable high-speed internet, so they can't stream content, they can't attend Google Meets. We believe it'll be a small number of people, but we'll certainly make arrangements for those folks if they need assistance in any form or fashion for those forms.
I know this wasn't really with the handbooks, but are we still going to have like stuff to bus? Because I do know that it's recommended every child have their own things. Is there still some sort of community stuff to bus so that we can help out with that?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't necessarily a school district activity, the stuff to bus. I mean, obviously these materials. What we're talking about is the conversations I had today were around art class. And does each student need to have their own materials for an art experience versus do we clean it in between classes? It's again, there's a number of unique challenges that might be classroom or program specific that we're going to have to kind of work out as we move forward.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Lena, who is over there? Joanne? First, motion made by Lena, second by Joanne to approve the high school student handbook. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Lena.
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Lucas?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, it passes 9-0. District NTI handbook.
Michelle is going to walk us through the NTI handbook. Michelle, are you going to do the Chromebook handbook, or Roxy's going to do the Chromebook? Roxy's going to do the Chromebook handbook. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the NTI handbook was created in response to our pandemic experience in March and really intended to kind of outline expectations for all involved. So you'll see here, first of all, getting a little feedback. I apologize. The first part that it articulates, which we talked about here, is the need for communication between families and students. And we've identified as a district that we will utilize primarily email, Skyward Messenger, the district website, social media, and then for instructional modes or practices, we will use Google Classroom at the middle and high school level, and then a program called Seesaw at the elementary level. So that's the first part. So making sure that we're able to communicate successfully with our families. Before I move into kind of just the overview of this, I want you to know that we have a team of teachers right now that are working very hard at creating some online tutorials for all involved. So this past week we had a wonderful opportunity where our teachers came together to experience learning as a student in a virtual sense, and some of that learning was professional development regarding the use of Google and different applications that they could support the learning of their students. So they were getting some tutorials on that. Those same ladies that put together some excellent tutorials for our staff are also putting together tutorials for our families and for students. So there will be links, there will be a linked resources page to this document on our website, and that's in the works right now, so that families will be able to, if we have to go into a virtual or non-traditional instructional mode, they'll be able to find out, how do I access and support my child in getting into their Google Classroom? How do I support my child in accessing their email? Things like that. What do I need to know as a parent, and what can I do? So while those tutorials are being created as we speak, this document outlines the timeline if we have to go into an extended school closure period. It outlines student expectations. These things would be, and teacher expectations, everything down to a digital citizenship contract, when your teachers will be available for you. We did notice that when we're learning in a non-traditional instructional mode, the time that you are accessible to families or to students as a professional, it's kind of open, right? If you happen to be up at 2 in the morning, they might be working at 2, the kid might be working at that point. So we're talking about here setting up daily routines and structures, and when are your teachers going to be, what are their working hours, those types of things. What does it look like to be an active learner, okay? So we talk about student expectations, we outline some teacher expectations. These things will be really important for us, and it will make us much more successful if we're able to come back to school, because there's some, prior to NTI, teachers will teach students, and it lists the following things, so you can see that document for those, that bulleted list, and the things that teachers will have in place so that that instruction is successful, because it will be new learning. And how will you engage your students in a virtual sense? So there'll be a lot of background knowledge knowledge and some foundational skills in those early weeks of school that we'll need to do so that this is most successful. It also has in here some parent or guardian expectations, as we are really a team, all of us, right, working together to support our students as we come together in when we say non-traditional instructional mode, we really mean that. So that's what this document outlines, and I'm curious as to what questions you might have, because as we put it together, we're just trying to clarify some things for all individuals, and certainly things would become more specific by building what the student schedule would look like as we release it. So to give you an example, the middle school is going to be working with our school improvement team to outline when you're in a cohort and you're attending in person, this is what a typical day will look like. Because they're not moving about in the room. So at what time does 8th grade have math? All 8th grade students have math at this time, right? Mm-hmm. So then, when you go into a non-traditional mode of learning, where you're attending at home, what will that look like for a student? So we expect that schedule will be laid out for students where they know that if they have appropriate Wi-Fi or means to attend virtually, they would log in, the teacher would take attendance, the teacher would be providing instruction for a lesson, maybe it's a pre-recorded lesson, and then they would be sitting in that Google Meet. The student could go off, log off, work on their work, log back in, and receive assistance. Because the teacher will be there for that duration of that class period. So if I have math from 8:15 to 9:30 on a typical day, my teacher will be virtual, and I can log in and reach my teacher during that time. So that's what we're thinking at the middle school level. Each building level then will have to make sure they're communicating via the different communicative tools to parents as to what they can expect. So that's just an example. So I'm wondering what questions you might have.
There still will be an opportunity to differentiate with levels and...
Yes. If you're asking if I am accelerated per se, and if I'm let's say a 7th grader and I take algebra, yes, that 7th grader will still take algebra.
Okay.
Okay, so, but if we're running math at the same time in our building, I will just attend the correct virtual math lesson.
And I also see there is this contract. Does everyone sign this ahead as part of registration, the digital citizenship contract?
The intention of the digital citizenship contract is for teachers in their homerooms or advisory periods. They would be reviewing proper, we're calling it netiquette. Okay, so you're on the internet, and what is the appropriate etiquette that you're going to display, and how should I behave as a citizen in the virtual world? So that'll be something that needs to be pre-taught in those early weeks as students attend virtually.
And Google Classroom is what we're using.
Google Classroom is what we are using at the middle school and the high school. Okay. The upper elementaries, those children can be successful. Those teachers can use it as a tool. But what they've decided to use as their platform, which is very friendly for children in earlier ages, is Seesaw. Seesaw links directly to Google Classroom, so that we're working, the kid just logs into Seesaw, the student, just logs into Seesaw, and it clicks them into whatever application the teacher might be using. So the student only has one password.
I've seen that my grandchildren use that, and also they can share it with home, right?
Yes.
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 Video, different projects and things.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So if students were possibly exposed to COVID and they had to stay quarantined for 14 days or stay home, can they go on the classroom from home for those 14 days?
There's a possibility. We've been talking about that, so they can link in and teachers could, in a sense, broadcast that as a number of challenges.
And they would go over this at the beginning of the school year, so we're ready for whatever happened?
We're working.
questions? Thank you, Michelle. Is there a motion to, for the district NTI handbook approval?
So moved.
I'll second it. Who is that? Jim. Motion made by Kathy, seconded by Jim to approve the district NTI handbook. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote, Kathy.
Yes.
Melissa.
Yes.
Lucas.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Lana.
Yes.
And my vote is yes, it passes 9-0. District Chrome handbook. Roxanne.
So the Chromebook handbook is similar to when we had the iPad handbook. It's a one-to-one expectation for students when using this. We are going to be one-to-one devices, 1st through 12th grade. And as Michelle stated, there'll be a lot of education the first few weeks of school on how to use that, how to log in, all of those kinds of things. But the other thing that students and families need to know is this is a tool for them to be successful. How do I use that? When I get it, what do I need to do? If I'm returning it, which is at the end of the year, or most recently, we're collecting devices for summer school, what do I need to do? How do I take care of it? Don't eat or drink around it, those kinds of things. We are currently working on a proper case for the Chromebooks to keep them a little bit more durable. Looking at a couple options. We haven't finalized that yet. How to use your Chromebook at school. Again, it's a tool, it's not a toy. We have a system that we'll also be using called Go Guardian. Elementary has used it, middle school has used it, high school will be using it for the first time this year. And if you remember Vision at the high school, it's very similar. We get alerts if students are trying to access information that's inappropriate or concerning to us. If it's suicidal searches, those kinds of things. And when we get those, we do contact our social workers and have them have a conversation with students. So we get those emails all the time. Talking about if they're left at home, this child's job, and you'll see that kind of in the NTI, is that it's charged at home and then brought to school. If for some reason it comes to school and isn't charged, we will have some charging stations for them to use, and we will give them a kind of a loaner for the day if they bring it uncharged. Responsibilities, guidelines, what happens if I damage it? I had it on a table and it fell on the floor, or I poured water on it on accident, what's going to happen? So there's also a replacement charge part of this handbook, so families know ahead of time what it's going to cost to replace it, and it finishes up with just some frequently asked questions. This is also on our registration signature sheet. Are there any questions?
Of course, in front of the board.
Yes. If a family, if something happens with Chromebook, the average replacement cost is $235. Is there a way to, especially right now with so many people not employed, to look at a scholarship or working it off, or?
Yeah, I think we would take it on a case-by-case basis. Even if they could pay just something for them to recognize, yeah, I did what I wasn't supposed to do. And we asked them too, especially when we had this early on, is that if it gets stolen, that they fill out a police report, just a little more documentation for us.
I know you got the Chromebooks back, correct, after the school year. How did that work? Were most of them returned to perfect shape?
I can speak elementary-wise. I don't know about high school or middle school. Ours were returned in very good shape. I think one or two chargers were missing. So they came back. Yeah, I mean, they came back very well. And we're currently collecting those for summer school.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Jim?
Second.
Who second? Melissa? Motion made by Jim, second by Melissa to approve the district Chromebook handbook. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Melissa.
Yes.
Lucas.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Lana.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
My vote is yes, passes 9-0. First reading of Title IX. I'll read these in, and then again, they'll go to a second reading at the next policy committee. AG 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and educational programs or activities, and PO 2266, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education programs or activities. So those two are now read in as first readings and will be approved at the next board meeting through the policy committee meeting. These also have to be approved by August 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. So both of these are new from the federal government, and it was very short turnaround. We received this information in June, and we're told that they have to be in policy by mid-August. We did not get information from Neola until about a week and a half ago regarding these policies. So Stacy and I have gone through them. With the first reading approval, we're going to send these to our attorney. There's a lot of verbiage in here that is kind of judicial in nature, and we want some feedback on some of our procedures and policies that are related to this and make sure we're consistent in our administrative guidelines and policies.
Okay. So if anybody has something in there they read that needs to be added or subtracted, please contact one of the policy committee members or come to the policy meeting on Monday. Go ahead.
Did we have policy
No.
similar to this?
No.
Okay. So,
These are both new.
but it seems like they blended some, is that it?
I'm sorry, I have a really hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry, I'll take this off. Did we blend some policies together, is that? Because the language looks very familiar to me.
It's somewhat consistent. If you look at the end of the policy document, it relates to a number of state statutes as well. So there is some overlap between discrimination and harassment policies in general that look similar to this. And again, we want to be consistent in our processes, which is why I'll share this with Mr. Joe.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on. Consideration of adjournment to closed session. Consideration of adjournment to closed session on section 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories of an employee. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Jeff? Ken? Did I hear that? Motion made by Jeff, second by Ken to go into closed session. Discussion. Hearing none, we'll start this vote with Lucas. Jeff?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Jim? Lana?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, passes 9-0. We'll meet where we normally meet, back in the little theater. I try to get somewhere closer, but that's still with us.
That's enough place. Would it be possible, and I'll ask the board now, and I should have done it during discussion, if the administrative team members would like to stay, I'd like them to stay. If they can or would like to, if that's all right with
Yes, yeah, you can.
I'd like the administrative team members to join us if possible, if they can or would like to.
Yeah, okay.